Uncle, what are you doing?
Hey there, I'm reading about democracy and capitalism.
Democracy and capitalism? What is that?
Well, I will tell you. Democracy is a kind of government where all the power is not concentrated in just one person. It's the will of all the people in the population.
That's so cool. Like in Mexico?
Yeah, like in Mexico, we all go to vote for our president and the ones who we want to be governed by us.
Wow, that's really cool. And what is the other thing you said?
It was capitalism.
Oh, yeah, capitalism. What's that?
Capitalism is a way of economics where everyone, all the people individually, have their own money and the government can mess with that money. And the financial issues are managed through capital inversion.
Wow. So everybody gets what they work for.
That is
Right.
correct.
Yes, so I've understood what's capitalism and democracy. I'll tell everyone at school tomorrow. Thank you, Uncle.
You're welcome.
But Grandma, I don't want to go to bed.
You have to.
But I don't want to. I want to go outside and play.
It's way past your bedtime.
No, it isn't.
Yes, it is.
I don't want to go to bed.
What if I tell you a story?
Okay.
Have I ever told you a story about how your grandpa and I fought for independence?
Really? Wow, that's so cool.
Mexico's independence started in 1809 with the juntas that had place in Querétaro that were the members Miguel Hidalgo, Allende, Aldama, José Ortiz de Domínguez, and in these juntas, well, they talked and played cards, but they were conspiring against the government. José Ortiz was married with Mr. Domínguez, that was the corregidor of Querétaro. One day, the corregidor locked her up because he discovered the plan, and in that moment, Josefa told a servant to go with Miguel Hidalgo and tell them that they were discovered. Miguel Hidalgo had to start the war before, and the Grito de Dolores was in September 15 of 1810. El Grito de Dolores was in Dolores, and with this grito, the independence started. After El Grito, Miguel Hidalgo made an error because he didn't took the capital when he could, and another big mistake was that he didn't teach the peasants and other people how to make formations, military formations, and because all these people was angry with the Spanish ones because they had power and the others not, so they killed everyone that go to the Spanish side. José María Morelos y Pavón wrote a document named Sentimientos de la Nación. In this document stated that America is independent from the state, from Spain, and from other nations. Finally, in 1821, Mexico was independent when they signed El Plan de Iguala.
Okay, sweetie, this is a story about when your grandfather and I fought with Jose Miguel Carrera to achieve Chilean's independence.
You really did that, Grandma? Wow.
The Chilean War of Independence. This independence started because the Creoles wanted more power, and all the power was from the Españoles that were the Peninsulares. In Chile, there were a lot of governors, and then a military started a movement, a revolution, and this military was José Miguel Carrera. One time they tried to kill José Miguel Carrera, and he was disappeared. So Bernardo O'Higgins came in place of him, and when Carrera returned, O'Higgins first was mad at Carrera, but at the end he fought side by side with Carrera. After all these conflicts and not stable government, the Spanish tried to reconquer them, but they couldn't. Finally, in 1818, Chile achieved the independence.
Have I ever told you a story about how the British, French, my fellow Ottomans and I fought Russia?
No! Wow!
The Crimean War began in 1853 and consumed in 1856. This war was mainly fought in the Crimean Peninsula. This war was fought between the Russians versus the British, the French, and the Ottoman Turks. This war basically began because the Russians wanted more power and more protection over the Orthodox subjects of the Ottoman Sultan. Austria sided with Great Britain and France, and as a result, the Russians stopped supporting them. Great Britain and France weren't able to support Austria. Since they relied on them, Austria was defeated in 1859. This all concluded in the unification of Italy and Germany. Have I ever told you how Emperor Musuchito and I ruled Japan?
Wow!
Before the Meiji Restoration, Japan was ruled by shoguns who were military leaders, but in 1853, America came in a ship with a letter to ask for trade in Japan because they saw the great potential. In 1854, there was a treaty made that stated the U.S. will be given privileges. In 1868, the Satsuma Choshu samurais attacked the Kyoto Palace because they did not agree in the policies of this treaty. In 1869, the Emperor Mutsushito came into power. In 1889, a new constitution was made. This is called the Meiji Restoration because Meiji means enlightenment, so it was an enlightenment rule, and Japan became modernized. The emperor in this time was only a figure. The ones that actually were behind all of the decisions were the Sacho leaders. The system was kind of democratic because the low chamber was elected by the people, but it was mostly an authoritarian regime. All the industries were turned private, and the government gave money to them to make them bigger. But the farmers had to pay really high taxes for this. In this time was when Japan became modernized, and it was in this time when Japan became the power it is, and it adopted many Western ideologies like imperialism.
Wow, Grandma, that was a great story. Thank you.
Okay, now it's time to go to bed.
No, I don't want to go to bed. I'm too excited. I want to hear more.
Okay, this next story. Have I ever told you a story about how I led a revolution that changed the way the Ottoman Empire is ruled?
Before the 19th century, the Ottoman Empire was huge. It was ruled by sultans in a city called Istanbul. But after many defeats in the war and many unable sultans, the empire began to lose power. In 1876, a revolution began, but this revolution didn't last very long. But in 1908, a new revolution started. This revolution was led by young Ottomans who had studied in European university. One of the principal leaders of this revolution was named Kemal, and he started being the leader in 1915. By this time, the World War I was beginning to form, and the Allies had invaded Turkey. And in 1923, this revolution made the Allies leave Turkey.
Oh my god, that's so cool! Please.
Just one more. One more. Please, Grandma, one more.
No.
Please.
Yes.
Yes? Thank you, Grandma.
The Boer War began in 1999 in South Africa when the British people got angry because the Boers were resisting. In this war, about 20,000 people died of starvation. Also, women and children were sent to detention camps. Finally, in 1902, the war ended with the Boers being defeated. After the British victory, they established a new government that governed itself. Here, only a few Africans and all of the British could vote.
Conclusions. North America by the end of the 19th century, all North America had a capitalist system and a democratic government. That is, of course, if you don't count Mexico as part of North America. Latin America. By the end of the 19th century, most of Latin American nations had capitalist systems and democratic governments, with the exception of Cuba, who didn't achieve its independence until 1902, and Mexico, who at the time was under the dictatorship of Porfirio Díaz. By the end of the 19th century, Asia lacked democracy and capitalism. Japan, for example, had little to no democracy, since only certain government positions could be elected by the people. The rest of Asia wasn't any better, since a big part of the continent was still under imperialism. But even if these systems weren't very present still, things were happening all across the continent that led to this being implemented in the future. Middle East. By the end of the 19th century, the Middle East was still under the domain of the Ottoman Empire, and this was neither democratic nor capitalist. Africa. By the end of the century, all Africa was under the rule of European nations, with the exception of Ethiopia, which was the only nation who was able to resist the European imperialism. But even though they were independent from Europe, they were under an empire, which means that by the end of the 19th century, democracy and capitalism in Africa was non-existent. Europe. By the end of the 19th century, most of Europe had managed to establish democratic governments. Even though many European nations had monarchies, they were also ruled by a principle called ministerial responsibility, which was the idea that the prime minister, kind of like the president, was elected by the people. And by people I mean men, because it wasn't until the 20th century that women were considered people. Thanks for watching.
This much. All the girls stomp your feet like this.
I want to go to bed. What if I tell you a story?
His time is pingüino.
¿Quieres empezar de nuevo?
Pingüino.
After all